Ah, big little lies. We all tell them. Those little lies that are big. Hi, you guys, and welcome back to my channel where I do film reviews, and I act, and I do a bunch of other stuff. But this is a film review. Or, I guess, an HBO limited series with a bunch of famous people in it. Big Little Lies! Alright, so, this is my favorite place in the world. This is what made me watch Big Little Lies. Nothing else about it intrigued me, but it did probably start my, I'm gonna do abuse stories. I'm gonna talk about abuse stories. I'm a trained in that. I can do that. I can do a little thing. But anyway, yeah, favorite place in the world is Big Sur. Sometimes I just want to live there and work at the aquarium. I don't know. I think it'll happen maybe one day for me if I don't become famous first. But I gotta try to do that. So after that, maybe we'll try Big Sur. Anyway, it's pretty artsy, sort of. They do these long artsy takes, and they talk about how women don't let things go. And I just don't know if we just can, I think it's in our body. I think my period just makes me hold on to things. So if I'm going to let things go, fund me removing my uterus. Thank you. Then Reese Witherspoon's character thinks that her daughter is too young for an iPhone and also a brat. Mean things to say, but she's kind of a tell it like it is character. I love this, they're like, oh yeah, Reese Witherspoon is spunky now. I guess she was always kind of spunky, which is why we love her so dearly. And she's a feminist icon. Then we meet Ziggy and Shailene Woodley. She's just mom typed as a teenager. How is that? And she's dating somebody famous in NFL. Somebody like that. I get it, man. I would also date Shailene Woodley. Honestly, I feel so bad. She had the biggest turnaround of her career, right? She could have died in horrible, horrible shame. The Secret Life of American Teenager, which I will review on my podcast. But she didn't. She was like, no, motherfuckers. I eat ABC out and I spit out that show for breakfast. I am going to do things with my life. And she went on in and she did them. So basically, Shailene Woodley's character just kind of moves into this rich town. And most people are just stay-at-home moms. She's working because she's a single parent, but everybody else, and then there's a couple of career mommies, and Reese reassures Shailene that, part-time doesn't count, that pretty much a stay-at-home mommy if she wants to be. Reese does a lot of help with community theater. That's kind of her thing. I don't really like the investigation room that they do in this. Seems really fake and kind of obnoxious and unneeded, but whatever, I didn't write this show and I think there's good things about it, and maybe that was in the book, because did you know this was a book? It's a book. Hi. Reese is on kind of her second marriage. First daughter, dad is with this bohemian, free-spirited person that Reese wants to punch in the face. It's Zoe Kravitz, who does a really good job in this. Also, Reese Witherspoon is dating Adam Scott in this, which is great. Amazing. I think they talk about how chocolate doesn't hurt your ass, but honestly, chocolate makes your ass fat. And if you're already fine with the fatness of your ass, maybe stay away from chocolate. But chocolate's actually supposed to be it's been proven that it's semi-healthy for you. I've been eating a lot of chocolate recently and I'm alive, so here we go. And Reese's daughter is a bit of a fire starter. She has passionate about things, and Reese just kind of doesn't know what to do with her. And poor Reese is also dealing with that. They're trying to stop the play of Avenue Q because it's too raunchy, which is unfortunate. Avenue Q is incredibly raunchy, but it's so good. Also, who cares? Just let it happen. If we want to do some boring production so that everybody's I don't know, feels like they can go to sleep at night religiously. I don't understand, but here we are, Then they find out that, they think that Ziggy is hurting Laura Dern, who is the career mommy's daughter. And they find out that her neck has marks. It's honestly very scary and makes you shook. And she says that Ziggy tried to choke her. That's not the truth, in case you guys were wondering, but we won't know that for a while. And Shailene Woodley is well, if my son says he doesn't do it, I believe my son. And Laura Dern is obviously so mad, and she's no, you need to your child has to take responsibility for what he did. it's not okay for boys to hurt little girls. And what we begin to understand, we don't really get it in this like first episode, but Nicole Kidman is dating Eric from True Blood, and we find out that they're in a bit of an abusive cycle, but more on that later. So anyway, Laura Dern now has it out for Shailene Woodley because she believes that she is raising a bully, which, you know, this was not very appropriate, I think, to handle in front of the children like this. They should have, like, talked separately, like they literally have a fight in public in front of all the kids. That's just how they do it in California. And basically, they just are like, well, if you touch her again, Ziggy, you're in big trouble because it's not okay to strangle little girls. I feel like also maybe some men need to understand that it's not okay to strangle other girls too, unless it's some sort of BDSM thing in bed. And that's like, you know, case by case basis, and make sure you practice and do it safely. So Shailene Woodley is just like feeling down, feeling like she doesn't fit in here. And Reese is like, don't worry. It's, you know, she's like, well, to be honest, it's probably not going to blow over. It's going to blow up. And the tough part is like, you know, bruises heal, but stigmas last a lifetime. So they think that, you know, Ziggy is problematic, and Shailene Woodley, who's got a secret of her own about like Ziggy's origin, you know, probably has a fear of what Ziggy will become, and we'll get to that later. Or maybe we should just get to it now because I feel like it just informs everything. Essentially, Ziggy is the product of rape. He is my worst nightmare, honestly. I currently, as I am recording this podcast, I am off birth control, and I am so stressed out because I think about if I got raped right now and I had to have the rapist baby, because I don't really know if I could go through an abortion personally, and let alone if I can afford an abortion, and I don't even think I can afford a baby. And it's just, you know, life is hard and complicated and tough, and life sucks like that. So Shailene has learned some self-defense, obviously, because she's trying to take autonomy after her own body after that. I really loved Shailene Woodley's character. It felt very real and was very healing for me to watch. And then Reese Witherspoon is kind of hurt too, because her daughter kind of prefers to hang with Zoe Kravitz because she's like cool and younger, and Reese and the daughter look so much alike and are so much alike, and it's just a family struggle. And I think that would hurt, to be like hanging out with basically the person your ex left you for. Kind of devastating and hurtful and hard. And, you know, Adam Scott tries to be there for Reese and, you know, is sure of her own sexiness, but she's like, you know, it is hard. Zoe Kravitz is a babe. I think Reese Witherspoon is a babe too, but, you know, also Zoe Kravitz's look is like trending, where Reese Witherspoon's is like everybody's default. You know what I mean? Like, it's a hard thing. It's like Reese Witherspoon is the normal and Zoe Kravitz is like the different, and it's not to compare women against each other because I think all these looks can coexist, but you know, it's hard. Oh, Big Sur, and it's beautiful sunsets and huge houses, and it's just, I love it. And Laura Dern is just freaking out about what happened to her daughter, because that is like super scary. And she feels like that she's not liked, that she's demonized for having a career, and that she chooses to work. Her and her husband have some problems too. He's like kind of a weirdo guy, but they don't really say anything. I think maybe she's the board of the aquarium. I don't know. That aquarium is so cool. If you ever are in Big Sur, you gotta go to that aquarium. Just on a side note. And poor Ziggy is all sad because he doesn't think he's going to have any friends, because now everybody thinks that he's this guy that beats up this girl, and he swears that he didn't do it. And Shailene kind of explains that he will have friends. Oh, and it's so sad. I really feel like the teacher did handle that all wrong. It should have been like a private conversation, and it was not at all. And Reese is just like feeling sad because she doesn't have like any really like job prospects. And she's like kind of playing around with the idea of going to college, but doesn't think that anything is going to be good enough, and is just like super jealous of Bonnie, who is Zoe Kravitz's character. And her daughter is like, sorry you hate her and I'm unable to, you know, just cut through it. Just really, you know, stressful rich mom things you got to deal with, and the act of comparison that I think is very, very high out in California, which is so silly, because you could also compare yourself to the homeless people on the street and maybe feel a little bit grateful that your circumstances have led you here and that you're not dealing with that struggle. Also, I just hate that, like, a measure of success is not only monetary, like it's so much more, which I think Zoe Kravitz's character definitely kind of understands. She's like very much a hippie. And then we just see there's like a lot of violence between Eric from True Blood and Nicole Kidman. He'll like grab her. He usually does it when they're alone, and it like can sometimes turn into a sex thing, but it's hard too because they're looked at as like the ideal couple, like, oh, they're so in love, and they seem like perfect for each other. They're both like astoundingly good looking, and everything is not what it seems. And then Ziggy is sleepwalking, which adds to kind of the creepiness, because this story kind of keeps you in the loop for a while of if Ziggy is innocent or not. I don't know why. I always believed this kid. He's too cute. I just like, he reminds me of my little brother. So I was like, my little brother, like, I don't think he would do that. Sometimes you do just know. Then I love little Shaylee's mantra to Ziggy, where it's like, every day be so brave, which is so almost ironic because she goes on a big run, and these runs are like so cinematically filmed of her running on the beach, kind of like she's trying to just like run from the problem because she doesn't really tell anybody. It's like her own secret. Man, so hard. I luckily spoke up pretty early about my rapes as soon as I like knew, and it's been like never had to keep them a secret for too long. Not a lot of years. It was still like 13 years, which is way too long for me, but yeah, the people have to take them for lifetimes. Oof, that's hard. Anyway, they shut down Reese's play of Avenue Q because it's too controversial, which is rough. Nicole Kidman is getting shushed. Zoe Kravitz's character owns a yoga school because she's that chill. I think people are like struggling with menopause too. They're all like older women, which is pretty cool for the show. It used to be like, oh, if you're not 20, you're not going to work like a day in this town, right? And now I feel like more and more roles for women are older, which is neat. And the most interesting thing about Nicole Kidman's and Eric from True Blood's relationship is like sometimes like he goes to slap her in one episode and she slaps him back, right? Which you could argue is self-defense, but she definitely feels like guilty for it. And I relate because I have been in this position, unfortunately. And of course, too, it just is like the abuse cycle when it gets physical like that and kind of gets wrapped up in sex is so crazy because the sex is so intense. I mean, I don't even know how to even fully process the like danger of that situation because it goes just like from slap to kissing to they say that they're sorry and like nothing happened and it's like whatever. It's not a normal fight at all, and it's such a weird process, but the way that you go for it, it's so like chemical and hormonal that it starts to feel like it's a normal process. But I really loved how this was represented because it was like I stumbled upon the show right after I got out of my abusive relationship. And because when you get out of an abusive relationship, you're like, was I even abused? Am I just like delusional to myself? Like, do I not, am I really making this up? Because that's like, what the media has told you for so long and how it's been. And then all of a sudden I got this show and I realized, I was like, no, I wasn't making this up. I went through this too and just felt very validated. I've felt very lucky. Of course, too, I was always so amused because I think a lot of abusive men like love doggy style because you're like not a person to them, right? You're just like an ass and an object. Not to like demonize doggy style forever, right? Like me and my boyfriend have healthy doggy style sex, but I definitely can respect him more because he's not always requesting that, right? Like that's not the only position that makes him feel good. He likes to see my face, and I think that is just very telling. I know people don't always talk about sex like that, but hi, it's me, and I'm going to do that now. Because sometimes, no one talks about it, so you don't really know what is wrong. And two, I've always noticed too, abusers, like, they don't want to wrap it. They don't want to be careful with it. They just kind of just come in them, and that's it, So Shaylee ends up getting a part-time job, but she, like, needs a better one. Adam Scott's character is kind of coming around to thinking that, like, the meanest thing ever, too, is that Lorna Dern makes her daughter pass out invitations to everyone but Ziggy, which is so, so mean. I also understand, though, like, that's the guy that's accused of, like, hurting your daughter you don't necessarily want to invite to the birthday party, but that's awful. And Reese Witherspoon kind of agrees to, like, take that up on a cause because she's just, like, an angry person. And to make matters worse, a new accusation pops up with Ziggy because that he's tried kissing Annabelle during class, and now there's talk of sexual assault, which sucks so bad for poor Shailene Woodley's character, because that is just rough to have your son accused of the very thing that you've moved towns away to just avoid, because there's just been like no way around it, you know? And of course, Laura Dern's mom, who has all these resources, and Ziggy's mom does not. Laura Dern is like threatening to sue, and you know, it's just a lot for poor Shailene Woodley. It's just rough. And Madeline, in order to cheer up her new friend, invites on the same day of Annabelle's party people to Disney on Ice. That's so mean, but it's really funny too. Also, I love that Reese Witherspoon is such like a little, she just swears and cusses throughout this whole thing. She's like a firecracker mom. I love that. I like gritty Reese Witherspoon. It works, oddly. The other thing that we learn is that Nicole Kidman's character gave up her career to be Eric from True Blood's wife. I guess his name's Perry in the show, but which is something abusers love to do, because if you don't have a career, you're less likely to have money, thus you can't leave. And it's very interesting too, because he'll like beat her up and she'll give him a blowjob, and it really is like fucking and fighting. As Zane said, it's a paradise and a war zone, but it is like really messed up. And it's also like you learn that like that's like the association they get you to do, so that when they fight with you, you give them sex. And it's like, you know, they could just like be a nice person and get sex that way, but no, not when you're an abuser. I also love Laura Dern's line of "do not fuck with my daughter's birthday." I love that. I wish my mom said that to her abuser. I mean, it's so not fair, but especially like that birthday party, they were going all out. They were going to have a magician and the bounce house, man. They were not playing around. Luckily or unluckily for Nicole, being with a rich abuser is hard, because when you're with a poor one, they don't like really get you gifts. Or my abuser, who was poor, would just give me things that were my own stuff and give them to me. And it was like, this is not a gift, you know, like I bought this for myself. But he sends her flowers with a nighttime delivery, so they're expensive. But it's, you know, flowers are not going to fix abuse. I don't know what abuser needs to hear this today, but hello. And Reese gets pissed because she found like her older 16-year-old daughter had birth control pills and went to Planned Parenthood with Zoe Kravitz's character. She's not having sex, but Reese is still like mad because there's like, you know, repercussions. They can permanently affect the reproductive organs, which is so true. I cannot believe that, like, I was just put so easily on birth control at, like, 15, and they didn't, like, ask more about my periods or get to know what was going on. It was very strange. Also rude that they did it behind her back and didn't ask her about it. That is really messed up to do. I also like Shailene Woodley's line where it's like, I said to make up with Annabelle, who is Laura Dern's daughter, and not make out, because he gets accused of kissing. It's a really funny line. And in episode 3, we learn that Shailene Woodley's character was a brutal rape, where she thought the guy who was raping her was also going to kill her, which is, so hard. They all feel like that, honestly, to me, but I'm also sensitive. At Annabelle's birthday party, 6 kids weren't coming, and the girl looks so sad, but it's honestly a pretty cool birthday, but I get it. And it's probably traumatizing, whatever she's going through. Whoever is really hurting her. And of course, too, Ziggy has to fill out this family tree, and Jane, Shailene Woodley's character, won't answer questions about his dad because, you know, doesn't really feel comfortable telling your son, like, how do you? Oh my gosh, so awful. And Perry goes and attacks Nicole Kidman's character because he wasn't invited to go to Disney on Ice. They really be like this, you guys. They really, really be like this. That petty. Like, grabs her by the throat because he wasn't invited to Disney on Ice. There's this one review that I read, and it was like, really, Perry, you love Elsa that much? Some people really do, I feel like. And Nicole is like, if you touch me again, I will leave you. Oh, and it's scary. This relationship, like, it is not for the faint of heart. It's, like, hard to watch. It's so good, though. I mean, it's so well acted. There's not a lot of bad moments in this. Sometimes there's like a bit long of the drives that are slow, but it's also so Big Sur. Also, I think he breaks her bones in multiple places, and it's like really severe. Like, it is scary. I think it's so much scarier to live with that like slow pain towards death. Like it's like he's not only that's the scariest thing about abusers is like they're not going to just kill you outright. They're going to kill you slowly. And poor Reese, her daughter wants to move out of her house, which is so hard. Like that has to be crushing because she feels too much pressure living in her house, which I think Reese isn't. She just wants her to be good. Like she, wants her to have all the stuff that she didn't get. And her daughter like does not care about Stanford. She literally says, "Stanford, what's the point?" Iconic. Also, when they go to see Disney on Ice, they see Spider-Man smoking, and man, that would really kind of probably mess you up as a kid. I remember my brother got so upset when he caught our parents smoking. I don't have that big of a reaction to cigarettes, but it's never like, like I hope that they quit because I get scared of lung cancer, and it, obviously isn't good for you to smoke that much, but at the end of the day, it's their lives. And I feel so bad for Reese Witherspoon's character because the daughter goes to live with the dad who like wasn't there in her early years of her life. That her daughter just like felt too stressed out at home and felt the burden to be perfect, which I think just has like more standards probably than her dad. Her dad's probably a little more lax. And they had to get like the counselor involved because she was like too scared that her mom wouldn't listen. And I'm sure with like Reese's character's rage issues, she probably wouldn't have, but she feels like she couldn't be herself at home. And two, it kind of feels like a coup because she doesn't even know that they were discussing it with her dad. Like she didn't even know. She gets like bombarded at the school with the counselor, and the daughter is like, "Oh, I need to change spiritually." Oh, I would be so mad, but it's just devastating. And Reese's character really internalizes it and feels really sad and feels like she pushed her daughter too hard. And I wish I had a mom that cared about me half as much as Reese Witherspoon's. Like, this daughter doesn't know how lucky she has it. I wish I had the same. Also, a great line of, "She wouldn't leave me if I knew I had cancer." And Adam Scott is like, "You don't have cancer." And Reese Witherspoon is like, "I'd be willing to get it," which is so wild. And Laura Dern's character is interesting because she's this high-powered woman and also, like, fucks her husband in her office. It's pretty crazy. She's definitely still considering legal recourse to Ziggy for her daughter and just says that she's a bulldog because she cares. And she doesn't really care what, like, a small group of people think either. And Adam Scott kind of helps Reese Witherspoon reconcile the loss of her daughter and says, "Look, you made her strong-minded, autonomous. She could think for herself and make pretty big life decisions, and she's going to be an extraordinary person like her mom." And Perry is still promising to Nicole Kidman that he'll get better, and he eats her out as a gift. That's what all of the abusive men do. They're like, "Here, I ate your vagina. I hope this is enough." And it's like, it's not. Stop abusing me. And Laura Dern is a scared mom. She's like put Annabelle in therapy at 6 and is just scared because she's like, choking wounds last forever, which is so interesting because we have Nicole Kidman's character going through somewhat of the same thing, just older. And Laura Dern just is like never letting her guard down again because she's like traumatized that it doesn't seem like anybody is taking what happened to her daughter seriously. And Perry just makes up this whole thing of like why he gets anxious with Nicole Kidman's character and is like, "Oh, but you could have any man that you want and I would lose you." And it's just like, she should lose him, but he's the father of her children, so it's rough. And I feel like I didn't do enough justice about the family tree thing because I also didn't have a dad, and she tries to make it feel all right, like Ziggy feel all right about the dad, and is like, it's okay, everybody's board is different. And Ziggy's just like has this anxiety that he's going to get in trouble if he doesn't have it, put it down. And then I think Ziggy can also tell that she's like lying to him because she's even like Googled the name of a rapist and can't find it because it's a fake name. And it's actually somebody we know. Ooh. But she gets really pissed because Ziggy is like, "What's his name, for Christ's sakes?" And honestly, this kid actor does such a good job. And finally, thankfully, because that's the hardest part, Shailene Woodley confesses to Reese Witherspoon about her rape, and she's the first person that she's ever told for because Ziggy's 6, so 6 years. Oof. And she says, that she's moved on, worked through it, but she knows that she'll never be over it. And yeah, that's kind of how it works. So don't ever rape somebody because it's so terrible. I don't understand why we have to keep showing this for you'd understand. You know what I mean? If you are a rapist. I don't know why you'd be listening to my podcast. You're not going to get a lot of hype here, but just brutal. But she's going to keep moving forward, and she's going to make sure that her son has a good life, but she's not going to put the name of his father on a poster. Also, for whatever reason, I think just because I was so trained in abuse, I knew like right away who raped her. I put the connection away so quickly in the beginning of the series, and I knew I wasn't going to be wrong because I knew all the signs. Also, if you've ever had a strange desire to see Adam Scott dressed up in like Elvis and singing, well, you know, here you go. Anyway, Reese gets mad because her ex-husband cancels SAT tutoring, which is important. Unfortunately, we also find out that Madeline is hooking up with the theater director. Oof. Which is interesting. I feel like her affair with the theater director is a form of protection because she got left, so she's like constantly on guard and like doesn't want to put all her eggs in one basket because she knows how hard it was. Also, Adam Scott says that he loves his sweat on women. It's really messed up. It's kind of gross. And Reese gets so mad at him that he calls Bonnie the perfect stepmom, but also like she kind of is. She's like a stepmom people would dream of. Celeste, Nicole Kidman's character, agrees to help out Jane, Shailene Woodley's character, because she was a former lawyer, which is good for her. Also, I love Shailene Woodley's love for her son, which must be so hard and yet so easy at the same time, you know? But I also love that when they say the infinity times infinity. Oh, I used to do that so much when I was little, and it needs to be brought back. I need more I love you infinity times infinity. Love you more than the stars. Oh, so sweet. Celeste is also very helpful to Jane's character because she's like, don't give in and don't let those people get for you. You know, just do what is best for your kid. And Shailene Woodley like doesn't know because things are super overwhelming right now. And Nicole Kidman feels alive and awakened because she's using her brain for the first time in 6 years and can be her professional self again, kind of a self outside of her abuser. And of course, Perry then wants to control her and wants to have another kid so that she's kind of inhibited because, you know, pregnancy takes time. And poor Nicole Kidman feels a little bit sad because she feels like being a mother isn't enough. And I think that's kind of a result of her missing her own life because her current life is so controlled by somebody else. And by this point in the series, we start to realize that Nicole Kidman's kids are seeing like a bit of the assault. And we don't really know the toll that that's taking on them yet. And Jane is still thinking about moving back because, you know, things are going so hard in the town and she feels like she's just going to be ostracized forever. And Reese's character isn't helping because she's like, you know, trying to get Avenue Q back, maybe to have her boy toy and also to have something outside of her two daughters, since one is kind of little but doesn't super need her anymore and the other one is, you know, living at her dad's now. But, you know, the puppet's fucking Avenue Q and you can't fuck in Monterey, and there are zoning laws about sex shops, and even though Avenue Q is about love, racism, same-sex marriage, conversations like any community should be having, you know, it's just, it's a different world in Monterey, you know, they want to keep it pure. And Reese is like, you know, we want our kids to be open-minded and progressiveness, and the director she was working with, who she also boned, is like, you know, even though things are messed up, California's Constitution goes further than the federal, which is also good for Jane. But her and Laura Dern are enemies. I guess they were like mother and daughter, even though they're 9 years apart in the last time that we saw Reese and Laura Dern together. Not in this, but I don't know what movie that is, but I guess they worked together in a movie where they were mother and daughter, and I love that. That's so funny. But anyway, Ziggy's teacher schedules a meeting off-site with Jane and Ziggy, even though Ziggy was like, hey, Mom, you don't have to find my dad to make him happy, which is very sweet. But the teacher wanted to kind of take them away from the prying eyes because Laura Dern is like hyper about Annabelle being bullied, and the teacher definitely sensed the tension and is concerned if there's any like physical or emotional abuse. And the teacher still believes that Ziggy is bullying Annabelle, and she believes that it's maybe something in Ziggy's past that is making him this way. And, you know, there's this fear that Ziggy has inherited something from his abusive father, which is actually what is hurting Annabelle isn't inherited from abusive father, but it is not Ziggy. And I knew it wasn't. The boy's too sweet. Who would tell his mom that and then go hurt a girl? And it's just, I think, a very hard position for Jane to be in, because it's like, if she's created a monster from the guy who raped her, should she have not had the kid and put herself through all this stress for it? And it's just, oof, hard. But Jane agrees that she will get Ziggy to a psychologist, and Celeste, Nicole Kidman's character, also finds herself talking to a psychologist. And Jane knows that her son Ziggy is not a bully or a sociopath, even though I think she's still deeply petrified that he could be some sort of like evil genius manipulating her. But she, I think in her heart, knows that it's not him. And Jane is kind of coming to the surface because that is like the battle as a rape victim, just so you guys know, that when you finally come clean, you're not done healing. You don't just tell the truth and everything is right for you. That is like when the healing starts. So Jane, now that she has admitted her truth, is now dealing with all of the emotional stuff. And it's getting like harder to block because her body is now fully processing the memory. And Jane is also going to the shooting range using a gun and is kind of feeling, I think, powerful because she's, doing anything she can to get her strength back. And the director that Madeline Reese Witherspoon's character was hooking up with wants to blow up his life to be with her, and she does not want to blow up her life to be with him. And they end up getting into a car wreck together, which, oof. And of course, they have to lie more because they were caught into the car together and they need to, explain some part of it. I, liked the theater director's line, though, of, fuck convention, just throw that all away. But, didn't end pretty for him. I mean, he's fine. He, survived, but still. And they got into that car accident because I guess this, they ran a stop sign and this teenager that was texting hit him. Call it artistic expression. She was somehow very fine, but I think the director, had a collapsed lung and a concussion, which, oof. But Adam Scott seems oblivious to their secret romance thus far. Maybe a little on edge. The theater director's wife definitely is kind of onto something. And Jane is trying to meet her rapist. That is a step of the healing plan. You don't necessarily have to complete it because sometimes, obviously, rapists are dangerous, but it is something that one can do. But Laura Dern's character is pissed because they find a bite mark on Annabelle, and she's mad because Annabelle didn't tell her anything and is it's not all right to keep silent, you're being bullied. And Annabelle is a kid and doesn't understand, and she's doesn't know how it happened that they were playing. And she's Annabelle, you can't let a bully win. You have to speak up, use your voice, learn to fight back, and that it's never okay to harm somebody else. And it's not okay for innocent people getting hurt when they're kind. And man, it was just very, very powerful. But, now she's out for vengeance, and she's going to try to report any dirty clothes to child services of Ziggy. It's also pretty scary because for Celeste, Perry does this monster routine with the boys where he's a monster and chases them, and it's so repulsive. And the kids are laughing because they think it's fun, but it's just oof. Also, my other big question, kind of circling back to Annabelle's abuse, how is the teacher not catching when this moment happens? I understand that there are probably a decent amount of kids in the class, but still, what? Biting somebody is not necessarily easy or quick. And thankfully, Celeste finds that therapist, and you start to see her, false ideas that she was telling herself unravel. Because the therapist is trying to show that her life and her boys' lives are in jeopardy. But unfortunately, Celeste is not quite ready to walk away at this point and is going to give one more chance. Also, this is a good reminder as any to wear your seatbelt because that is what saved Reese Witherspoon in the car accident. And also another good thing to remember is that all of these women were willing to go with her when she confronted her rapist, which is very, very sweet. It's a very good friend. Jane and Laura Dern end up fighting because of the tension between each other, which is not good. And Jane's clearly unraveling a little bit because her lead for who she thought a rapist is wasn't him. And the interesting thing, too, is that it seems that Ziggy and Annabelle are friends. And due to the school not operating fast enough to her liking, she is going to invite Ziggy over to see if she can catch the bullying in her own house. Joseph's wife, Joseph is the theater director, is confronting Madeline about their affair, and she tries to make up some lie about theater props and ticket sales. And you learn that while like Adam Scott is nice as Reese Witherspoon's husband, he's not very great in the bedroom, which led her to screw. And Nicole Kidman is worrying about our kids turning into kind of spoiled little brats, and they like won't pick up after themselves. And like, honestly, picking up after yourself is a really good habit to learn as a parent. So I do not think that she is in the wrong. I can't remember if the school couldn't afford a teacher aide, but it still is insane to me that they did not catch this happening to be able to tell who it was actually happening by. And Jane talks about how Ziggy didn't come out crying, and she was like kind of upset he was born, but he did not scream. And the psychologist kind of gets a little bit deeper with Celeste and talks to her and says that, you know, like, you and Perry turn each other on by rage, and she definitely thinks it's a problem, you know, and that sex isn't always lovemaking. If there's bruises, it's a volatile relationship. If he's hitting first and you hit back, you know, it's not great to hit, but you're hitting in self-defense. And Nicole Kidman's character gets kind of angry and is saying, you know, you're demonizing him. This is like unethical. And the therapist is like, listen, I have an ethical responsibility. I sense you're in danger, that he hurts you. And Nicole argues that, you know, like sometimes it's my share of the blame to be violent. And the therapist again is like, he hurts you. And my heart is breaking. I wish I had a therapist that was that good. And she's like, you know, you have to want help. But, you know, she's just not quite there yet. And the therapist can sense that she's physically afraid and wants to give her techniques and strategies to get out of that relationship. And, you know, Nicole Kidman thinks that a lot of times that he treats her like a goddess, that they're very much in love, and that he's a great father when he's not hurting her. And that the sex is great and they make each other laugh. You know, all marriages are complicated, but the violence isn't normal, you know? And the therapist questions, well, like, are you afraid you're going to die? And, you know, she's like, I thought about leaving him many times, but, you know, he'd hit me, I would hit him, you know? And the therapist is like, you know, like one day the boys are going to know. Then poor Madeline is stuck with her daughter, who wants to do this secret project where she auctions off her virginity online and is going to donate the proceeds to Amnesty International, which is like not okay, right? Because it's going to be somebody older and creepier. And Reese Witherspoon feels that, you know, Bonnie's life is perfect, that she can't like really relate to her. And poor Ziggy is being suspended even though they don't know if it's really him. And Laura Dern is still threatening to sue her, and like, you know, Jane doesn't look bad. She had like a gun and almost brought it on an innocent man. And Nicole Kidman is still making up desperate excuses to believe that Perry is a good person. She believes that sometimes they both have the power, and the therapist basically explains like the high that comes from like when she's hit, and it's going to be, if you don't go, you know, it's going to be longer and longer until you try. And, you know, Nicole is like, it's, you know, the bruises fade, I can get my power back. And the therapist suggests that she should maybe rent an apartment for safety, you know, stock fridge, have the utilities, have a place, you know, another mindset, another life standing by should you need it, and get a custody document ready to go. And she's like, you're being kind of an alarmist. And the therapist is like, yeah, I'm alarmed by the situation. And Nicole Kidman is like, you know, Perry has resources, money, contacts, and a lot of like, you know, her self-worth is based on like how other people see her and her marriage. And her therapist wants her to confide in a friend, and she hasn't even told anybody. And she's like, you know, she's probably making it all up. She's being like gaslit, you know, as abuses do. And she thinks that, like, you know, if she said that he's wonderful so many times, if she says that he's a monster, they're gonna think that she was lying then, and the therapist is like, you're lying now about who Perry really is. And Laura Dern just feels like she doesn't know what to do. The daughter's hurt and she can't stop it. She's got an eye patch from the fight, which was not mature. For a while I thought it was going to be Madison's daughter Chloe that was the bully because of all of Reese Witherspoon's rage, but I was wrong. And Reese Witherspoon's character kind of lies to herself and is like, you know, the essence of a happy marriage is like the ability to pretend, which is so sad that a lot of people think that. It's sad. And it's definitely hard for Reese Witherspoon because Ed, Adam Scott's character, feels like he wakes up to the girl of his dreams and feels like a loser. And she, you know, knows that she's not the best wife, that she's angry at times, that she's made mistakes. And when the daughter told about her unconventional radical idea, you know, she tried to tell all of her family to not overreact, take a breath, and process before the judgment. Obviously, too, she was kind of led on to this by Bonnie, which is not great, but they, you know, do not take it well, Reese and her ex-husband Nathan, because they're like, this is, you know, basically 16-year-old white girl child porn, and, you know, she's doing it for a good cause, to protest sex slavery. Like 7-year-olds are sold into slavery, which is so hard and shocking and disturbing, and something that is a reality that I more and more cannot turn a blind eye to. But, you know, it is a noble cause, but a very misguided campaign. And then Reese Witherspoon ends up throwing up because she doesn't want her daughter to be a prostitute, and she blames it on Bonnie's shrimp. We get to see this tiny sliver of anger that is beneath Bonnie when she says, like, God damn it, at it. Like, you can tell, like, oh, she's all zen for a reason. Then Celeste finally stands up for herself because Perry tries to basically essentially spousal rape her, and she hits him in his penis with a tennis racket, and he says, you're lucky I didn't kill you, and that motivates her to go find an apartment. And the therapist is kind of preparing her for questions that lawyers will ask in the room, like, why didn't she leave him sooner? Why didn't she leave him sooner? What was he like as a father? All the stuff that they'll try to do to protect his character, which is, sucks. Reese Witherspoon's character then goes to try to talk about the theater, but he's just mad. Anything that he cared about her now is like just turned into rage, which is awful. And she admits that she was selfish and that she risked destroying everything, and she knows that she's not perfect. And it broke my heart when she said that. Reese Witherspoon is so good. Also, the Big Sur ocean is beautiful, and I miss it all the time. And Nicole Kidman's character finally just like gives up and is like in fetal position, and just is like probably crying for the first time, just like can't get up, and is just, I think it's all finally hitting her what she is going to have to do. Also, I didn't circle back to like one line that I wanted to say, and like the director was like, oh, you were here because it was the best sex of your life, which is like what a lot of abusive people say. Like, the director is abusive too, and in a way I think Reese Witherspoon's character is abusive. These are some all flawed abusive people, and it is just, this is a remarkable story about abuse, honestly. Very, very good. Probably in my top favorites of it. But anyway, Celeste's plan is that they're going to go to the gala tonight together, but when he goes to leave in the morning, she's going to move her and her boys into the apartment. And the therapist is so mad that she is going to go to the gala, and it's like, and she says, which is so poignant, it's like, your husband is ill, but so are you. And Celeste really believes that Perry would never hurt the children. Jane finally gets Ziggy to admit who is the real bully, who is really bullying Annabelle. Because Annabelle made him promise that if the bully is identified, that she might get killed dead, and he shows his mom who it is. And Jane is like, you know, if to be a good friend, you have to tell me, which is a very good lesson too. And when you know who it is rough. It is one of Nicole Kidman's boys, the boys whose father is an actual abuser. Oof. Then nobody really likes this scene, but Jane and Madeline are in a coffee shop, and Laura Dern's husband comes and tells them off, and the guy at the coffee shop kicks him out, and he was just trying to impress Jane, so they kind of set up that interest in each other. And then Celeste is worrying that splitting up is going to negatively affect the kids. And we also have this sweet moment between Reese and her ex-husband where he's like, I still root for you despite all our shit. But then he kind of digs into her and says like, oh, Bonnie's going to be singing at the gala tonight and she's going to be really good. And then Celeste has some panic attacks and flashbacks of everything now that she is getting out of it. And flashbacks are some real shit. It was so hard to function build. It was so hard. And then Jane calls Celeste and talks about that it was her son Max who's been bullying Annabelle all year, and that Annabelle is not his only victim, that she's thrown Sky down the stairs and has been hurting her too. And Celeste kind of understands that, like the violence was in the DNA, who was the dad. And what's interesting too is that he is also Ziggy's dad. Bum, bum, bum. All the twists, here they are. And, Jane tried to be sweet and be like, people, they're kids, it's a bully and they, they'll grow out of it. It's not permanent. And she kind of realizes, seeing like her own husband, that, sometimes it unfortunately is, because they don't get caught. I felt so bad for Nicole Kidman's character. It's hard to even talk about because I saw so much of myself in her and Jane. And she has a very mature conversation with Max and is like, listen, we all do bad things sometimes, but I can't help you unless you tell me. And so he cries and I think has a moment with like dealing with all the tensions that are in this universe and world. Holy goodness. Madeline then confesses to her daughter Abigail that she has had sex with Joseph, the theater director, and it weirdly brings them close together. It's definitely probably inappropriate, but I think it's humanizes Madeline to Abigail for whatever reason, and she doesn't really understand why her mom wanted to blow up her life, but I think she understands that her mom is in pain, and instead of pretending, in front of her, it becomes real more. And she kind of explains, when you're holding on to this idea of protection and doing something right all the time, then finally something has to give, and it like doesn't excuse it. But she doesn't quite have the courage to tell her husband Ed yet. And of course, Perry tries to like fuck her before the gala event. They always do this. They always want you to be like late so that you're like frazzled and constantly in the state where you cannot keep up with yourself. But unfortunately too, he finds out that Tracy, the property manager, called and was talking about the smoke alarms, and now her jig is discovered. And then Ed starts to suspect that something happened between Madeline and Joseph, and both of them drink all of these really strong drinks. Bonnie does kill it at her song, and they say that the room is full of erections, which probably very true. I am meanwhile sweating over here when I was first watching this because Perry is driving fast. Nicole Kidman admits to him that, their son Max hurts Annabelle, and that, this is not a way that men treat women. You can't hurt women. And, it's not a surprise that he does, and Perry kind of argues like he hasn't seen or heard it, but obviously he has, and he argues that he will change, but Nicole Kidman knows that he won't. And Perry argues that he's got madness and demons in there and that he's fighting them. They always do this like thing where it's like so hard for them, and it's like, yeah, you know what, it's probably hard for everybody in some way. Like, you still could not. They get enjoyment out of it. I can't pretend that they don't. And Perry is just begging Nicole Kidman to help himself, do whatever it takes. And Nicole Kidman was like, no, you were supposed to respect and cherish me, and you didn't. Like, violence is your only reaction, and I should have left you long ago. And he's like, you have to stay for the kids, and she's not having it. I am, like, shocked if it really is Adam Scott singing it. Adam Scott ends up singing the song, and then Madeline runs out because it's a love song, and I think she feels super guilty, also super drunk, and she just feels like a horrible person, and she, isn't even rooting for her husband on stage, which is, selfish, because she's eaten up by her own guilt. And Madeline's ex-husband and her current husband start fighting for whatever reason, I guess because they're drunk, and then for whatever reason, Bonnie sees Celeste and Perry arguing and heads off. 100% that, like, Ed was totally a dick in this thing, but I guess he felt like he had to stand up for Madeline, because I think that is in part why she left, because he was always trying to see devil advocate, and that, like, is a marking of a good guy. Like, I know my boyfriend is like that too. It's like, oh, we're, trying to see the positive, and, when you've been through a bad situation, you want somebody positive, but sometimes it's like, listen, some people are assholes, and we just need to admit that. And all the girls meet up, and apologies start happening about how it wasn't Ziggy, and, and even Madeline apologizes for how mean she is to Rita and stuff. And, even though Jane, like, almost poked out Laura Dern's eye, it's all kind of forgiven, because Celeste admits that, it was her son. And then Perry comes in, and Celeste is like, I'm not going back with you. I need a minute. And he, like, kind of shuts down the friends and is like, oh, I'm talking to my wife, not you. And then we see that Jane recognizes who he is, and Perry recognizes who Jane is, and they realize that he's the rapist, and he runs towards them. And we cut to the opening scene of the series, which is also kind of one of the last scenes of the series. And it was so hard, because I knew Perry was a rapist, but I also didn't want to be right. That didn't make me feel good. That didn't make me feel good that he was a multi-time victim, like that there are a bunch of other Janes lying about around California because of his rampage, his work trips, and to think that, there are millions of people who go out and do this. It's not fun. But anyway, Perry's dead, and probably for the best he needed to be, because it's really hard to change those people, and we don't put enough research and effort into finding it. And if we could, I think we could maybe make a better world. I think people would still make mistakes, but, like, without abuse, life would definitely be easier. The cops kind of all get a sense that these women are lying, because the language was all the same. And it's very interesting to me, because it was like he was pushed, but it was also kind of self-defense, because he ran after them. I guess it was involuntary manslaughter, and what they would get, like, 12 months of community service, so not, like, amazing, and obviously not great for the record. But now Jane is, tied to Celeste, because that's her children's half-brother, and both of them have been hurt by Perry. And it's so hard, because, too, now these kids lose their dad, which is awful. And we see that it was Zoe Kravitz, Bonnie, who pushed him. Hippies have the most rage, I guess, but they're all on the beach moving past it, and they're all not going to let Bonnie take the slack for it, and Nicole Kidman is free. And that is Big Little Lies season 1. I did also watch season 2, and I will give you all of those details as well. Something that we also didn't get before I end this first one is that, I guess, I didn't read the book, but I did some research, obviously, and I guess Bonnie had an abusive father, which is why all that rage came through. And it is a little bit confusing, because it is not addressed in the series. And obviously, Bonnie's skin color kind of puts her at, the lawmaker disadvantage of, doing anything bad, which is unfortunate. But no one's going to jail, and the bad guy got his due. And what did you guys think? What did you think of this story? I'd love to hear your thoughts. I really liked it. I thought the abuse was so good. It wasn't, like, the best thing I've ever seen in my life ever, but I do appreciate this telling of abuse, and I hope to have more stories like this, because I think it is so powerful, and it does help, especially that there are so many solutions and self-reflecting moments. So I'm going to dive into season 2, because it's going to be really exciting, and I have so much to say about Meryl Streep's character, so check out soon for that. Thanks for listening. Make sure you subscribe, and check out my other videos, and check out my social media, and yeah, let's support each other. Have a good one.